It was a Tuesday afternoon when I got the email. Subject line, exciting news about QuantumSight. I was in my garage workspace, the same place where I'd spent thousands of hours developing the technology that would change how the world interacted with data visualization. My name is Alex Rahman, 36 years old, former software developer at Tesla, and this should have been the best day of my life. Instead, the email from our lead investor, Marcus Heidelberg, contained a press release about to go public. QuantumSight Technologies secures $40 million series of funding. There was my idea, my technology, my dreams, but my name was nowhere to be found. Instead, it listed my business partner, Daniel Wright, as founder and visionary behind the groundbreaking technology. I read the email 3 times. Closed my laptop. Walked to the kitchen. Drank a glass of water. Returned to the laptop. The email hadn't changed. Daniel had somehow convinced our investors that QuantumSight was his creation. 5 years of my life erased with a press release scheduled to go live in 24 hours. I didn't call Daniel. Didn't text. Didn't throw things or scream. That's not who I am. Instead, I searched through our shared cloud drive, found that most of my development files had been duplicated then deleted. The original timestamps had been altered. The architecture documents I'd created had been modified. My digital fingerprints were being systematically erased. Everything okay? My wife Sarah asked from the doorway. She could always sense when something was wrong. Yeah, I said, not looking up from the screen. Just some work stuff. She lingered a moment longer before walking away. I heard her on the phone in the other room canceling dinner plans with friends. Somehow she knew we wouldn't be celebrating tonight after all. Truth is, I shouldn't have been surprised. 6 months earlier, things had started changing. Small things. Daniel stopped asking for my input on investor pitches. Started taking solo meetings with our attorney. Began questioning design decisions I'd made 2 years ago. New passwords on shared accounts. New employees I'd never met. But I didn't confront him. Didn't start checking his messages or following him around. That's not who I am, but I wasn't blind either. So I made some quiet moves of my own. Nothing dramatic, just precautions. I maintained a separate code repository with authentication logs. Kept original notes and sketches in a safety deposit box across town. Backed up emails and recorded key conversations legal in California where both parties don't need to know about the recording. I moved my prototype and original designs to a separate storage unit, things that mattered. I also documented every development milestone with timestamps and witnesses, not enough that he'd notice, but enough that I wouldn't be starting from zero if things went south. The night before our last investor meeting, Daniel had clapped me on the shoulder and said, "We're so close, man. Once this funding comes through, everything changes." His eyes were bright, excited, but there was something else there too, something calculating. I should have known then, but part of me still hoped I was wrong. I wasn't. What Daniel didn't know was that I'd prepared for this moment. And what he didn't understand was that I never start fights, but I do finish them. I met Daniel at a tech conference in San Francisco in 2019. I was presenting research on multidimensional data visualization, and he approached me afterward, full of questions and ideas. He had an MBA from Stanford, connections throughout Silicon Valley, and the kind of confidence that made people want to follow him. I had the technical brilliance but none of the business savvy or charisma. "You're thinking too small," he told me over drinks that night. "This isn't just a research project. This is a company waiting to happen." We were partners 8 months later. QuantumSight was born, my technology, his business acumen. The perfect match, or so I thought. The core technology was something I'd been developing for years, an algorithm that could take massive, complex datasets and render them in intuitive, 3-dimensional visualizations that responded to natural human movement. Imagine being able to physically walk through your company's financial data, grabbing Q3 sales figures with your left hand while comparing them to manufacturing costs with your right. Or doctors navigating through 3D medical scans using just their eyes and subtle hand gestures. The applications were endless: healthcare, finance, education, urban planning. Daniel used to say he was proud of what we were building, though he never quite understood the technical side. His background was in marketing and business development, not code. He'd ask when I was going to simplify the architecture, not realizing that the complexity was what made it powerful. The neural network that interpreted user movements had to be sophisticated enough to feel intuitive. That was the whole point. We rented our first real office space in Palo Alto in 2021. A small suite with windows overlooking a busy intersection. Nothing fancy, but it was ours. My name and Daniel's were both on the lease, but I covered most of the deposit from money my parents had left me when they passed away within a year of each other, heart attack and stroke. Not a fortune, but enough to keep us going through the lean early days. The first 2 years were exhilarating. We secured a small seed round of $750,000, hired 3 engineers to help me build out the prototype, and landed our first pilot project with a mid-size healthcare company. Each time we hit a milestone, Daniel seemed to become a little more distant, a little more possessive of the company's public image. It was subtle at first. He'd introduce himself as founder rather than co-founder, or he'd do interviews where my contributions were mentioned only in passing. It's just easier for the press to have one-point person, he explained when I brought it up. Investors prefer a clear leadership structure. I understood the logic, I did. But something felt off. Still, the technology was evolving beautifully. We were making real progress. That should have been enough. In late 2022, things started changing more noticeably. Daniel began having closed-door meetings with investors. He hired a new marketing director without consulting me, someone who referred to him exclusively as the founder. He started talking about phase 2 of the company without explaining what that meant. I suggested we clarify our roles and responsibilities. We're fine, he said. Just going through a growth phase. Then came the late nights when he'd stay at the office after everyone left. The weekend strategy sessions I wasn't invited to. The technical questions about the architecture that seemed designed to extract information rather than understand it. I should have confronted him directly, but that's not how I handle conflict. Never have. My father, a mathematics professor who emigrated from Bangladesh in the 1980s, taught me to think before speaking, to be sure before acting. So I watched and prepared quietly because my instincts told me something was coming, and in the tech world, you learn to trust your instincts. 2 weeks after getting that email with the press release, I was sitting at my desk when my phone buzzed. A notification from our company Slack. I'd been removed as an administrator from multiple channels. I set down my coffee and opened my laptop. I no longer had access to our investor relations channel, the executive team channel, or the product roadmap repository. My credentials for our code management system had been downgraded to read only. Chen, one of our engineers, glanced over at me. Server problems? I closed my laptop. Something like that. That night, I drove to our attorney's office, not the company's lawyer, but one I'd consulted privately 3 months earlier when my suspicions first crystallized. Michael Abernathy was an IP specialist with 20 years of experience in Silicon Valley disputes. They've made their move, I said, showing him the press release and my revoked access. Michael nodded slowly. Sooner than we expected. Have you spoken to Daniel? No. And I'm not going to. Good. What about the investor, Heidelberg? No contact yet. Michael leaned back in his chair. Have you checked your employment contract recently? Any unusual amendments or requests for signature in the past few months? The question triggered something. A month ago, Daniel had sent over what he called updated paperwork for the new funding round. I'd been busy debugging a critical system component and had only skimmed it before signing. I pulled out my phone, found the document in my email, and handed it to Michael. His expression darkened as he read. Alex, this isn't standard funding paperwork. This is a new intellectual property assignment. It gives the company, which Daniel now apparently controls the majority of, exclusive rights to all technology you developed before and during your employment. My stomach dropped. That covers everything. The core algorithms, the interface design, even the theoretical work I did at Tesla. Exactly. And based on California employment law, this would supersede some of your original founder protections. Michael continued scanning the document. Wait a minute. He pointed to a section on page 4. The signature on this addendum, is this yours? I looked closer. It was my name, but the signature wasn't mine. The loop on the O was wrong, and I never connected the H and A in Rahman the way this version did. No, I said quietly. That's not my signature. Michael's expression changed to something more determined. That changes things significantly. We're not just talking about a business dispute anymore. We're talking about fraud. What's our next move? I asked. Michael considered for a moment. We need more evidence and we need to be strategic. Daniel's smart. He's been planning this for months, maybe longer. But he made a critical mistake with that forged signature. He tapped his fingers on the desk. I want you to do something that might feel counterintuitive. Nothing. Nothing? Don't confront Daniel. Don't contact investors. Don't even tell your team what's happening. Act normal while we gather evidence and build our case. Can you do that? I thought about the countless hours I'd poured into QuantumSight. The 3 a.m. coding sessions. The algorithms I'd refined over years. My life's work. Yes, I said finally. I can do that. The next day at the office was surreal. Daniel was there, smiling, chatting with staff, acting like nothing had changed. He even stopped by my desk to ask how the new gesture recognition module was coming along. Making progress, I said, my voice steady despite the anger and betrayal churning inside me. Should be ready for testing next week. Great, he replied, clapping me on the shoulder. We need to keep innovation moving forward. The irony was almost painful. For the next week, I played my part. Came to work, coded, attended meetings, nodded at appropriate times. All while documenting everything, screenshots of my restricted access, copies of communications, backups of code repositories that still showed original creation timestamps. I even managed to recover some deleted security footage from our office showing Daniel accessing my computer late at night when he thought no one was around. Meanwhile, Michael was working behind the scenes, preparing legal documentation and reaching out to select contacts in the investment community to discreetly gather information about what Daniel had been telling potential funders. 10 days after the initial email, I received a message from an unexpected source. Marcus Heidelberg, the lead investor himself, wanted to meet privately, away from the office, away from Daniel. Is this wise? Michael asked when I called him. It could be a trap. Heidelberg has no reason to trap me, I replied. And if Daniel put him up to this, it gives us an opportunity to find out what he knows. We agreed I would meet Heidelberg but would record the conversation and share nothing substantial until we understood his position. The meeting was set for the following day at a coffee shop in Mountain View, neutral territory. Public enough to be safe but quiet enough for a private conversation. Marcus Heidelberg was not what I expected. In his early 60s, with silver hair and round spectacles, he looked more like a university professor than a venture capitalist managing a multi-billion-dollar fund. He greeted me with a firm handshake and ordered an espresso before getting straight to the point. Mr. Rahman, I believe we have a serious problem with QuantumSight and I need to understand exactly what's happening before my firm transfers $40 million. I maintained a neutral expression. What kind of problem? Heidelberg glanced around, then lowered his voice. In the past 3 months, Mr. Wright has presented himself to my partners and several other investment firms as the sole inventor and technical mind behind QuantumSight's core technology. He's been quite persuasive: presentations, demonstrations, technical explanations that seemed knowledgeable enough to convince most of my colleagues. He paused. But not me. My curiosity was piqued. Why not you? Because, Mr. Rahman, before I became a venture capitalist, I spent 20 years in research and development at IBM. I hold several patents in data visualization systems myself. When Mr. Wright explained what he claimed was his neural network architecture for gesture recognition, he made fundamental errors that no true inventor would make. I felt a surge of vindication but kept my face impassive. I see. No, I don't think you do, Heidelberg said, pulling a small device from his pocket and placing it on the table. A digital recorder. After that meeting, I began recording all my interactions with Mr. Wright. California may be a two-party consent state for recordings, but my firm is headquartered in New York and our investor agreements include consent to record meetings for due diligence purposes. He tapped the device. Would you like to hear what Mr. Wright said about you when he thought he was among friends? Without waiting for my answer, he pressed play. Daniel's voice emerged clearly from the small speaker. Rahman was a necessary early resource, good technical mind but no vision, no business sense. The original concept was always mine. He was essentially an advanced coder implementing my architectural design. The new IP assignment puts everything where it belongs. By next quarter, we can transition him out completely. The story will be that he's pursuing other opportunities. No one will question it. Another voice, presumably one of Heidelberg's partners, and there's no paper trail suggesting otherwise? No risk of ownership disputes? Daniel again, laughing confidently, none that would stand up. I've been careful. Besides, who are investors going to believe, the charismatic founder with the complete technical understanding and business vision, or a socially awkward programmer who can barely explain his work to lay people? This happens all the time in Silicon Valley. The difference is I was smart about it. Heidelberg stopped the recording. There's more, but I think that illustrates the situation. I sat back, processing what I just heard. The calculated betrayal was even worse than I'd imagined. Why are you showing me this? I asked finally. 2 reasons, Heidelberg replied, pocketing the recorder. First, my firm doesn't invest in businesses built on fraud, it's bad ethics and worse business. Second, having reviewed your background and the original patent applications which still show you as primary inventor, I believe QuantumSight's technology has extraordinary potential. but its potential can only be realized with authentic leadership that truly understands the innovation. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting, Mr. Rahman, that before we transfer $40 million, we need to be confident it's going to the right company leadership. I have a proposal, but first, I need to know what evidence you have of your role as the true inventor and developer of QuantumSight's technology. I considered my options. Michael had warned me to share nothing substantial, but this unexpected ally could change everything. I decided on a middle path reveal enough to confirm my position without showing all my cards. I have original development logs with authenticated timestamps. Patent applications with my signature, my real signature. Prototype designs dating back to my time at Tesla where the initial concept was formed. Witness statements from early collaborators. And recordings of my own, documenting key development milestones. Heidelberg nodded, seemingly satisfied. Good. That's very good. Here's what I propose. Give me 48 hours. Don't confront Mr. Wright, don't change your behavior at the company. After that time, I'll contact you again with a more specific plan. And the funding announcement scheduled to go live has been temporarily delayed due to final due diligence requirements. Mr. Wright is not pleased, but he has no choice if he wants the money. As we stood to leave, Heidelberg fixed me with an intense look. Mr. Rahman, Silicon Valley is full of Daniel Wright's charming opportunists who believe vision without execution is innovation. But true innovation comes from people like you who do the hard work of turning ideas into reality. I've been doing this for 20 years and I know the difference. With that, he was gone, leaving me with a complex mixture of emotions, hope, vindication, but also uncertainty about what would happen next. The following day at the office was the hardest yet. Daniel was visibly agitated, snapping at team members and constantly checking his phone. The funding delay had clearly rattled him. Twice he called Heidelberg's office and twice he was told the investor was unavailable. Around midday, he called an impromptu staff meeting. Just wanted to update everyone on our funding situation, he announced, his usual smooth confidence replaced by a brittle intensity. We're experiencing a short administrative delay with the Series A, nothing to worry about. These things happen. In the meantime, I need everyone focused 100%, especially our technical team. He looked directly at me. No distractions, no side projects, no communications with external parties. Company confidentiality has never been more important than right now. The threat was thinly veiled. He suspected something but didn't know what. After the meeting, he followed me back to my desk. Alex, got a minute? Sure, I said, continuing to type code. Is there anything you want to tell me? Anything I should know about? I turned to face him, maintaining a neutral expression. About the gesture recognition module? It's still on track. No, he said, lowering his voice. About any conversations you might have had recently. Outside the company. I thought about Heidelberg, about Michael, about all the evidence I'd been gathering. I thought about the recording of Daniel dismissing 5 years of my life's work as being an advanced coder. Nothing comes to mind, I replied calmly. Why do you ask? He studied my face for a long moment. Just making sure we're all aligned during this critical phase. This funding round is everything we've worked for. Yes, I agreed. Everything we've worked for. After he walked away, I received a text from an unknown number, secure conference call, 8 p.m. tonight. Check email for details. The email arrived minutes later, containing only a phone number and access code. I deleted it immediately. That evening from my home office, I dialed into the conference call. Michael was already on the line, along with Heidelberg and a woman who introduced herself as Anita Desai, legal counsel for Heidelberg's investment firm. Mr. Rahman, Heidelberg began, since our meeting yesterday, we've been working to verify your claims and examine Mr. Wright's actions more thoroughly. What we've found is deeply troubling. Ms. Desai will explain. Anita's voice was crisp and authoritative. Based on our investigation, we believe Mr. Wright has engaged in multiple instances of fraud, intellectual property theft, and securities violations. He has misrepresented ownership of key patents to investors, forged documents, and attempted to misappropriate company assets. Most seriously, from our perspective, he has knowingly provided false information during the due diligence process for a significant investment round. Michael spoke next. Alex, this goes beyond a business dispute between founders. This is actionable fraud. We have enough evidence to pursue both civil and potentially criminal charges. What's our next step? I asked, mind racing with the implications. Heidelberg took over. We've developed a strategy that serves everyone's interests except Mr. Wright's, of course. Tomorrow at 9 a.m., my team will arrive at QuantumSight offices for what Mr. Wright believes is the final step in the funding process. Instead, we'll be presenting evidence of his fraudulent activities and offering him a choice: resign completely from the company, relinquishing all claims to the intellectual property and accepting a small settlement, or face immediate legal action from both my firm and yours. You think he'll just walk away? I couldn't keep the skepticism from my voice. When presented with the alternative of years of litigation, significant legal expenses, and possible criminal charges, yes, I believe he will choose self-preservation, Heidelberg replied. Men like Daniel Wright calculate risk and reward continuously. When the risk becomes overwhelming, they cut their losses. We spent the next hour refining the strategy, identifying potential complications, and preparing responses. By the end of the call, we had a clear plan. One last thing, Heidelberg said. Mr. Rahman, assuming tomorrow goes as planned, my firm is still very interested in investing in QuantumSight, the real QuantumSight, with you as the rightful founder and CTO. The terms would need to be renegotiated, but our enthusiasm for the technology hasn't changed. After the call ended, I sat in silence for a long time, processing everything. Sarah found me there, staring out the window into our backyard. Bad news? She asked softly. No, I said, surprising myself with a small smile. I think maybe good news. But a complicated day tomorrow. She nodded, understanding without needing details. Want to talk about it? Not yet, but soon. That night, I slept better than I had in months. I arrived at the office early the next morning before anyone else. I wanted time to center myself, to prepare mentally for what was coming. At precisely 9 a.m., the reception desk called to announce visitors. Marcus Heidelberg and his team had arrived. Daniel emerged from his office, straightening his tie, a practiced smile on his face. Show them to the conference room, he instructed, then turned to me. Big day, Alex. Maybe you should finish up that code review while I handle this. Actually, I said calmly. Marcus specifically requested that both founders be present for this meeting. A flicker of something, annoyance? Concern, crossed his face before the smile returned. Of course. Let's not keep them waiting. The conference room was our most impressive space, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Palo Alto streetscape. Heidelberg sat at the head of the table, flanked by Anita Desai and two men I didn't recognize. Michael sat slightly apart, his expression neutral but alert. Daniel's step faltered slightly when he saw Michael. I wasn't aware legal counsel would be joining us today, he said, the smoothness of his voice now forced. Mr. Abernathy is here at my request, Heidelberg said. Please, both of you, sit down. We have much to discuss. What followed was the most clinical, methodical dismantling of a person I had ever witnessed. Heidelberg began by placing a thick folder on the table. Mr. Wright, this contains evidence of numerous misrepresentations you've made regarding QuantumSight's technology, ownership, and development. Would you like to review it, or shall I summarize? Daniel's confident facade held, but just barely. I'm not sure what you're referring to, but I'm happy to clear up any misunderstandings. Very well. Heidelberg nodded to Anita, who began laying documents on the table one by one. Exhibit A, patent applications showing Mr. Rahman as primary inventor, contradicting your statements to our investment committee. Exhibit B, original development logs with authenticated timestamps proving Mr. Rahman's role in creating the core algorithms. Exhibit C, forged intellectual property assignment with a falsified signature, constituting document fraud under California law. With each new piece of evidence, Daniel's expression grew more strained. When Anita reached into her briefcase and pulled out a small recorder identical to the one Heidelberg had shown me in the coffee shop, Daniel's face went pale. And finally, Heidelberg said, recorded statements in which you explicitly outline your plan to remove Mr. Rahman from the company he founded and take credit for his innovations. He pressed play, and Daniel's own voice filled the room, confident and dismissive, explaining how he had systematically positioned himself to steal my work. When the recording ended, silence hung in the air. Daniel looked around the table, calculating, assessing, his mind visibly working through options and escape routes. These recordings were obtained illegally, he said finally. California is a two-party consent state. Anita smiled thinly. As I'm sure you're aware, Mr. Wright, your investor agreement with Heidelberg Ventures includes explicit consent to record meetings for due diligence purposes. Page 17, Section 4, Paragraph B, which you signed and initialed. Daniel shifted tactics. This is ridiculous. An obvious attempt by a disgruntled employee to sabotage a major funding round. Alex has been increasingly unstable, jealous of the company's success, Mr. Wright, Heidelberg interrupted, his voice quiet but forceful. Stop. You're only making this worse for yourself. Michael slid a document across the table. This is a separation agreement. You resigned from QuantumSight effective immediately, relinquish all claims to its intellectual property and technology, and agree to non-disparagement and non-competition terms. In exchange, you receive a settlement of $250,000 and we do not pursue civil or criminal charges. Daniel stared at the document, then laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. You expect me to just walk away? From a company valued at over $100 million pre-money? I built this company. Without me, QuantumSight doesn't exist. It was the first time I'd spoken since the meeting began. That's where you're wrong, Daniel. I built the technology. I solved the problems no one else could solve. You were the front man, the face, valuable, yes, but replaceable. Daniel turned to me, his composure cracking. You think you can run this company without me? You can barely look investors in the eye. You freeze up in pitch meetings. You need me. Perhaps he did, Heidelberg interjected. But that was before you made the critical error of trying to steal from him. Now he has something much more valuable than your presentation skills. He has the truth, documented and verifiable. Daniel looked from face to face around the table, seeing no allies, no sympathy. His shoulders sagged almost imperceptibly, the first genuine physical reaction I'd seen from him. And if I don't sign? He asked quietly. Anita answered. We file civil suits for fraud, copyright infringement, patent infringement, and breach of fiduciary duty. We provide evidence to the district attorney for potential criminal charges of document forgery and wire fraud. We contact every investor and potential partner you've spoken with and share what we've discovered. Your reputation in Silicon Valley would be irreparably damaged. Daniel stared at the separation agreement for a long moment. Then, without another word, he picked up a pen and signed it. The rest of the meeting was procedural, details of the separation, the transition announcement, next steps for the company. Throughout it all, Daniel sat silently, his expression unreadable. When everything was finalized, he stood up. I'll clean up my office now. That won't be necessary, Michael said. Your personal items will be packed and delivered to your home. Your access to company systems has already been revoked. Daniel looked at me one last time. I underestimated you, Alex. I didn't think you had this in you. I know, I replied simply. That was your biggest mistake. After he left, escorted by security, Heidelberg turned to me. Well, Mr. Rahman, or should I say, founder and CEO of QuantumSight, shall we discuss the terms of your series of funding round? The transition wasn't seamless, of course. Nothing in business ever is. Some team members left, uncomfortable with the sudden leadership change. Some investors pulled back, wary of the drama. But most stayed, impressed by the technology and my newly demonstrated resolve. With Heidelberg's guidance, I hired a seasoned COO to handle the business operations that Daniel had previously managed. I focused on what I did best, refining and expanding our technology, solving impossible problems, creating something valuable. 6 months after Daniel's departure, we closed our Series A round. $35 million at a $120 million valuation. Lower than Daniel's inflated projections, but realistic and sustainable, the press release went live on a Tuesday afternoon. Subject line, QuantumSight Technologies secures $35 million series of funding. There was my name, listed as founder and CEO, creator of the groundbreaking technology. The journey had come full circle. That evening, as I sat in my home office reviewing the coverage of our funding announcement, I received an unexpected email from a former classmate. Saw your funding news. Congrats. Also saw this and thought you should know. The attachment was a screenshot of a LinkedIn post from Daniel announcing his new role as CEO of a stealth startup working on revolutionary data visualization technology. The company was registered in Singapore, beyond the reach of his non-compete agreement. I closed the email without replying. Daniel would always be Daniel, charming, relentless, willing to cut corners. But he'd underestimated me once, and it had cost him everything. I doubted he'd make the same mistake twice. More importantly, I knew something he didn't. True innovation can't be stolen. It comes from the hundreds of small insights, the thousands of hours of focused work, the countless failures that finally lead to breakthrough. He could copy my results but never replicate my process. A year later, QuantumSight launched its first commercial product to widespread acclaim. Our technology was being implemented in medical centers to visualize complex diagnostic data, in financial institutions to map market patterns, in research labs to model climate changes. We were changing how people interacted with information, just as I had dreamed we would. Daniel's company launched 6 months after ours. Their product looked similar on the surface but lacked the fundamental innovations that made our system truly intuitive. Within a year, they had pivoted to becoming a consulting firm for data visualization projects. Within 2 years, they had closed altogether. Sometimes I thought about reaching out to Daniel not out of malice or to gloat, but to understand what had driven him to betray someone who had trusted him completely. I never did. Instead, I focused on building something that couldn't be stolen or forged or betrayed, a company culture based on integrity, recognition of contributions, and shared success. Every engineer, designer, and business professional at QuantumSight was acknowledged for their work. No one person, not even me, was positioned as the sole genius behind our technology. 3 years after that fateful meeting in the conference room, Marcus Heidelberg called me with news. A major tech company was interested in acquiring QuantumSight for $1.2 billion. What do you think? He asked. It's a strong offer. I thought about the journey, the late nights coding, the breakthrough moments, the betrayal, the recovery, the growth. I thought about what the technology could become in the hands of a company with global reach and resources. Let's talk to them, I said. But I have conditions. The team stays intact. The technology continues to develop according to our vision. And we maintain ethical guidelines for its implementation. They'll agree to that, Heidelberg said confidently. They're not buying just the technology, they're buying the mind behind it. They're buying you, Alex. I smiled at that. No, I said. They're buying what we built together. Make sure they understand that distinction. After we hung up, I walked through our now expansive offices. Engineers were gathered around screens, debating algorithm optimizations. Designers were testing new interface elements with focus groups. Business development teams were on calls with potential partners. This was what success looked like, not a single name on a press release, but dozens of brilliant people working together to create something meaningful. Daniel had never understood that. He'd been so focused on being the one person who got the credit that he'd sacrificed the chance to be part of something truly transformative. In the quiet of my office, I pulled out an old notebook, the one where I'd first sketched the core concepts of what would become QuantumSight. The margins were filled with questions, dead ends, moments of inspiration. This was the real story of innovation, messy, collaborative, iterative. My phone buzzed with a meeting reminder, final review of the acquisition terms in 10 minutes. I closed the notebook and stood up, ready for the next chapter. Some people enter your life to help you build something extraordinary. Others enter to teach you painful but necessary lessons. Daniel had done both. And in the end, that knowledge was worth more than all the funding rounds and acquisitions combined. As I walked toward the conference room, I made a mental note to call Sarah afterward. We had something to celebrate finally, not just the money, but the vindication. The proof that doing things the right way might take longer, but ultimately leads to greater success. The conference room was full when I arrived, our team, their team, lawyers, advisors. Heidelberg nodded at me from across the table, a small smile of satisfaction on his face. 3 years ago, he'd taken a chance on a technical founder who'd been betrayed. Now that bet was about to pay off spectacularly for everyone involved. Shall we begin? I asked, taking my seat at the head of the table. The acquisition closed 3 months later. The press release went out on a Tuesday afternoon. Subject line: Tech giant acquires QuantumSight Technologies in $1.2 billion deal. This time when I read it, I smiled.